Well, happy holidays to whoever watches this. It's been kind of weird this last week. Some arson in the community like burned down the building, building over, so it's been smoky like the whole week. Um, but something interesting that happened today. Well, I think over the last few days, so Cade Metz, there's a certain thing known as like tech journalists. So they write in like a lot of major publications like Wired or The Times or The Atlantic, but they cover like technology. So Cade Metz wrote about GPT-3. And I guess like when I read it, it was like an explainer for a novice, like people who aren't in the field of AI, just so they can understand what GPT-3 is, like how it works. And so Gary Marcus, who's like a really famous statistician, I think he's created like a couple really prominent packages. I can't remember the name of the packages, but he's like a creator of these like really famous stats packages. And he was basically saying like GPT-3, so someone posted like GPT-3 is a step toward like AGI, and then a whole bunch of people responded like yes it is, or like no it's not. And he was basically like GPT-3 is not a step at all toward AGI. And a lot of people just like started the conversation, because I do feel like there are people on both sides of the fence. So if you're not in the field of like artificial intelligence, you don't know what GPT-3 is. It's this really highly trained model with like billions of hyperparameters and like and just so much money spent on compute, and it has been trained on I think the entire Reddit data set and some Wikipedia articles and some other like training data from the internet. So like it's a language model, and the big idea is to be able to like get the language model to create on its own like text that makes sense, that's like logical, right? And it's been doing a pretty good job. Like it's written songs, it's written emails, it's like spoken in the voice of other writers and artists that it's been trained on. So it's actually doing a really fair job, but it's not explainable. So the reason that a lot of the people on the opposite side, like the statisticians like Gary Marcus, are basically saying that's not a step toward AGI, because artificial general intelligence can reason, and those models, they can't really reason. They can like recreate, like regurgitate text, or maybe like make assumptions about what's next, but there's no like logic. Like I don't think GPT-3 will pass the Turing test, so there's not like intelligence there. And I think to me it brought up like just a really interesting conversation which I've been following for a while, which is the whole like field of causality, which is like heavily populated by statisticians, which is like one of the other reasons like I'm like when I do like fully like re-enroll in school, it would be as a statistics major, just because like to understand machine learning, it's basically all statistics, and the causal reasoning is like a whole field that came out of like Judea Pearl. Judea Pearl wrote the book like Causality, where he's trying to like explain like why things happen, because like numerically, and causality. A lot of other statisticians have now started to think about like how this applies directly to artificial intelligence, and so they've been having a lot of conferences about like causal reasoning and causal inference and Bayesian methods and Markov processes, and really thinking about like how to make explainable models. And there are like 4 or 5 really long papers on my reading list about like explainability in machine learning. And I think that's really like correlated with fairness in AI, because a lot of people are talking about fairness in AI, but what I really think they're trying to get to the crux of is like explainability. Because if you could explain a model and explain like why the model got to a certain conclusion, then you could actually reason on like, okay, here's how the model got there. But we can't even do that yet because these models are not explainable. So I think as opposed to jumping toward are they fair, maybe we should start with like, why did they get there? So that's the whole field of like explainable AI and ML. And it's one of the major reasons like medical providers, the legal field in general is not like they're not like widely adopting ML techniques for anything besides like operational processes that are extra manual. But anything that actually has to do with like critical thinking, reasoning, and logic, unless it's like some of the pretty complex logic trees, you could definitely like, you don't even need like machine learning for that. You can just basically use logic trees, and that would be like enough. But yeah, I think it's interesting to like actually start to have a public conversation outside of like the Bayesians over here and then the like deep learning people over here, and to say like, oh man, like is GPT-3 actually a step toward AGI? Because clearly, like, I think a lot of people in the open AI community believe it is, and now it seems like a lot of people on the maybe even like the robotic side and like the causal reasoning side think it's not. So I think it's just interesting, and I'm just here for the conversation because I kind of think it's both. I think it is a step toward AGI. I think it is.